Welcome back to another episode of the Nebraska Football Show. I'm Tim Verghese, as always, joined by Steve Marik. Steve, we're back at home this week. How excited are you to be back in Lincoln?
Haven't covered a football game inside Memorial Stadium for like a month, Tim. What's it been? I mean, it's been forever. It feels like. Obviously the bye week had something to do with that with Nebraska, but it'll be good to stay at home and cover a game in Lincoln. And I'm excited for this one. Considering everything that went on in Bloomington, Indiana, and then the response that Nebraska showed in Columbus against number 4 Ohio State. This one against UCLA is a big one. I mean, it's a really big game. Just to kind of see where this team is actually at, where Nebraska, where Matt Rule guys, his guys are actually at. So I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, a game that has a lot more intrigue than I think some people think, just because of one, what's on the line, but two, yeah, I mean, you look at the records and you're like, oh well, Nebraska can't sleepwalk into this one. I mean, this is a UCLA team that's coming off a bye week, played their best football right before the bye week. And I've talked about it a couple of different places already, but a bye week is so important for a first year coaching staff to just be able to take a break and sit down and figure out what we do well, what we don't do well, and really adjust what's going on. It's important for we talked about it with Nebraska, how important a bye week was for Dylan Raiola and the offense, and obviously, how little changes we've seen from that. But maybe the second bye week will be more beneficial for Nebraska. But for UCLA, I mean, you've seen adjustments. They've made adjustments as the year's gone on, and then they have this bye week to sit down. Nebraska's going to get a fired up UCLA team that's going to
Yeah,
cross
they
multiple
will.
time zones. And
Hmm.
there's that statistic out there of teams that are crossing the time zones typically end up
Yeah.
losing, but also teams that end up crossing those time zones are also typically the underdogs just because of the type of games they're in. So once again, UCLA is going to be the underdog, but again, Nebraska will have to be ready. I don't think this is one that Nebraska can necessarily sleepwalk through, but I think listening to Tony White talk today, I feel like the team's going to be motivated, specifically the defense. I think they're
Mm.
going to be out to prove something. For Tony White, obviously, this is a little more personal. Kind of what's your
Hmm.
feel on this team just getting out of these press conferences? This team's mindset coming out of these last 2 weeks and heading into this final stretch.
Well, the mindset is, what are you going to do after that great performance at Ohio State? And it was a great performance. Not a lot of defenses have done what they have done to Ohio State like Nebraska's black shirts did. Not a lot of defenses can say they held Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, to the rushing yards that they did in Columbus, which is a 62 rushing yards. Ohio State only managed against Nebraska. So it was a great bounce back effort from the defense. We could get into the offense and what we saw there, but special teams as well. The mindset with Nebraska coming out of that Ohio State game is like, okay, you know what? We can do this. We can hang with these guys. We can hang with a roster like Ohio State's, and we can do stuff. So now what are we going to do? Now what is the next step? What's that response going to be like against a UCLA team that is very beatable, but has also had a rough stretch of it? I mean, they lost 5 straight, but Tim, let's go through this schedule for the Bruins. They played at Hawaii. They won by 3 points, 16-13. They had a bye week. Then they played Indiana at home. They lost 42-13. Then they played at LSU. Then they lost. Then they hosted Oregon. Then they played Penn State. Then they played Minnesota. Then they went to Rutgers. Look, Tim, this is a tough schedule that
Yeah.
UCLA was given their first season in the Big Ten. They are battle tested. Have not had a fun go of it lately, an easy go of it. But I think they really showed something flying across the country and then picking up that 35-32 win at Rutgers. That was a game that everybody just picked Rutgers because of, like, oh, UCLA, they've been losing all these games. They're flying across the country. There's no way they're winning that game, against a Greg Schiano team at home. Well, they did. And so they're going to be, now they have a bye week to prepare for Nebraska, 2 weeks to prepare. They're going to be getting a really motivated Bruins team, and the vibe I'm getting from Nebraska is just, what are we going to do with this opportunity that we have? Because it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to show everybody that you are behind. That 49-point loss at Indiana is behind you, and that you have completely kind of flush that down the toilet, and now you're looking ahead to UCLA. And if they get that, that's a big game because that's bowl eligibility right there. 6 wins. They haven't Nebraska hasn't done that since 2016, so it would mean a lot to a lot of people in and around the program for Nebraska to kind of seal that thing and be bowl eligible in Memorial Stadium in front of a packed crowd that hasn't had a home game in a month. So I think this is a big deal, and this is going to be a good game against two teams who have a lot to play for still.
Yeah, and you look at this UCLA team, and like we said, they have a tougher schedule than or the record doesn't say everything about that team,
I don't
but
think
at
so.
this
Yeah, it's
yeah, but
tough. I mean, it was real tough.
for sure. But at the same time, it's also, if this team is who we believe they are, and that Indiana game is the one, what's the word I'm looking for? The one outlier of the season, just in terms of the result and how they played and all of that. You'd expect Nebraska to come out there and look like the better team from start to finish. Like you'd expect Nebraska to do that, right?
I think so. I think so. And they're at home. They're going to have a 90,000 right behind them. They have a defense that is coming off a great performance against Ohio State. They have an offense that has been under fire, an offensive coordinator that's been under fire. But they're going to want to grind out another win at home on Tom Osborne Field and then be bowl eligible. So I think, like I said before, this is a big game that a lot of things are going to be going on with it. There's a lot of different angles, a lot of different storylines. But to become bowl eligible, for the first time since 2016, that's going to mean so much.
Yeah.
It's going to mean progress. It's going to
Yeah.
be, baby steps to finally turning this thing around, perhaps. So, yeah, it's just the first game of a final 4 game stretch here. Last year, Nebraska went over in November, so they obviously don't want to do that because that would be really bad if that would happen again. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Tim, I forgot what the question was. I've just been like kind of going around here, but yeah, it's gonna be a big game. I don't know what else to say other than
Yeah.
it's gonna be a big game.
Yeah, I think early in the season, you and me kind of looked at this. I was like, oh, Nebraska should roll, but then we're getting closer to it, and
Hmm.
it's like the way these teams have played, and I've been watching UCLA, and there's still some talent at the skill positions, some talent in the trenches, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Like
Yeah,
there
we need
there
to
are
mention. Yeah, we need to mention Jay Toa, but yeah,
Oh
go on.
yeah. Yeah, there's some guys, and so
Yeah,
and you watch the way they play, and especially the leading into the bye, they're playing their and Tony White said it too. They're playing their best football at this point, and then coming out of the bye again, it's a good chance to rest up after that brutal start to the season. Just again, you get beat up, man. You play Oregon, you play, it's like Penn
Penn
State,
State.
like you get beat up. Those teams
Hmm.
beat up on you. So I'm interested to see which UCLA team comes out of the bye week. I want to ask you because you mentioned the offense, and reading the
Mm.
check down, you hinted it, and I kind of touched on it as well on the radio on Monday. I feel like Nebraska's, that there's a lot to fix with the offense, a lot to get to there. But I feel like they started to find something in the run game with those traps.
Yeah, traps, wham blocks. I mean, it was, for a lot of the year, everybody's just been saying like, where's the creativity in the run game? Where's the creativity? Well, I think we saw some creative stuff to try to just generate more yards in that run game. And those were wham blocks from tight end Thomas Fedoni, who I thought had one of his better blocking days. A lot the narrative with him is, he's a great receiving tight end, but he can't block. I think he's kind of showing this season that he has improved in that area. Is he at where he wants to be right now in that category? Probably not, but like nobody is. It's college football. Everybody's kind of working on becoming a better player. And with Thomas Fedoni, it's his blocking. But I thought he had a good day blocking, and he was lined up off the line of scrimmage, and he was asked to kind of do just a what they call a wham block on an interior defensive lineman who's like 300 pounds plus. And I thought Fedoni was good in that area. He helped spring Dante Dowdell for a 19-yarder in the fourth quarter with a wham block. Another trap, Justin Evans, I thought was really good with some of
He's
those
a
trap
good puller,
blocks.
man. I like watching him
Yeah, he can
pull.
get him on the get him on the move, and he moves well. He's not the tallest guy in the world, but like he's still hard to get under for defensive linemen, and blocks. So yeah, they were just doing little tweaks with their blocking scheme that I thought was new. I might have to go back to previous games and see how much of this they were doing before, but like, there are different things
It felt new. It definitely
happening.
felt
It
like
did. It
something.
felt new.
Yeah.
And it produced. And it produced against a good
Mhm.
defensive line. So Nebraska, they had over 100 yards rushing for the first time since Purdue, and they were doing that on a really good Ohio State defensive front against those guys. So I thought it was good to see just different stuff and having that different stuff work. So and we can talk about the screens. There were more screens, more failed screens, but Matt Rule on Monday said that you know that's something that is built in to every college offense, and a lot of quarterbacks, if they are taught to check into those screens if they see a loaded box in front of them and a run is supposed to go right in there. So instead of, running into a wall, basically take your chances outside where you have maybe a numbers advantage and go there. Look, in theory, it works great. In theory, it sounds great. It sounds productive. But at the end of the day, you need to block those, and Nebraska is not blocking them right now. So it's just going to be interesting to see where the screen game goes from here.
Yeah, a lot of Nebraska's like offensive issues too. You listen to the explanations for everything, and it's like it's sound process, but the results aren't there. And what's frustrating is the results aren't
Mm-hmm.
there because of coaching too. Like we said, like
Yeah.
perimeter blocking is a coaching thing. It's a coaching point. Like I noticed it last week. Jamal Banks specifically has been a guy that's gotten a lot of
Yes.
heat for his perimeter blocking struggles. He right now, I mean, pretty consistently is just like locking his arms like full out to perimeter block, like it's full extension. That's not how you're supposed to do it. Like that's just like again, at some point, it's like, hey man, like someone in practice needs to step in and be like, hey, that's not how you're supposed. Like bring your guy in and like part of the reason he gets called for some of that holding or the block in the back is because he has that full extension. Guys get around him. He's just trying to get a hand on it. It's in the side. It's in the back. He pulls a block in the back suddenly. But for a guy as big as he is, it is just it's tough to see him um just struggle the way he has as a pass blocker or as a perimeter blocker. I think I thought they started to find some consistency there later in that game, but again, it's going away from Banks and at this point too. I don't know how much you want to be doing that because Banks is proven as a receiver at least he's very reliable and
Mhm.
I think it's I don't know. I'm curious to see how Satterfield and this unit adjusts. I mean, we've talked about kind of the issues with the offense overall this year, but I mean, it was mentioned today too, like with Dylan Raiola and the offense. Some of those, like we said, on those screens, about I think Damon Bennett said it on the radio Tuesday, and he'll know as well as anyone that's on the outside. About 2/3 he said of those screens are checks from the quarterback, and you can see Dylan
Yeah.
checking into some stuff. And
Yep.
sometimes it works. Sometimes it's like, the open throw he missed to Jamal. That's a check from Dylan.
Hmm.
Dylan made checked into that play. But then
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, okay, he checks and it's a screen. And I understand why he's doing it. Again, the process is correct. You see a loaded box, you check into the
It's
screen.
numbers. It's a numbers game. It's math. Throw
Right.
to where the numbers are not.
Yep.
So like I get it. I get it. Like a
Yeah.
lot of
So
offenses do it, but other offenses block it. That's the main thing.
yeah. And so we're at a point now with the season where like I personally when I'm grading prospects or I'm grading like coordinators or whatever, like when I'm scouting and evaluating and from the top end when you're looking at like, scheme and all of that, you're always looking at process over results. And again, Nebraska's process for the most part is sound. I think one area where the process isn't necessarily sound is the um plays building plays on top of each other, like sequencing in a drive. Like I think at
Mhm.
times Nebraska gets either too pass happy or too run happy. They get too much into a tendency and they hone in on that at times. And that's something that I think will need to change. That's a process element where I'm like I don't love the process there, but for the most part, again, the results haven't necessarily been there, and I understand that leads to frustrations, but that the process overall is sound. It really just ultimately comes down to execution.
We touched on it a little before in this discussion, but and this is a hard discussion to have because he is a true freshman quarterback with only 8 games under his belt. But Tim, I think you'd agree with me that Dylan Raiola needs to start hitting some of these passes that are there, that Marcus Satterfield is drawing up, and it is producing open receivers. He had one to Jamal Banks that would have been a touchdown that would have changed the look of the entire game if he would have hit it. Earlier in the game, he had another one. It's kind of I'm blanking right now on which one it was. It was a corner route to the back pylon to Ja'Cory Barney. Like these are passes that are so close to hitting, but they're just slightly overthrown. And instead of touchdowns, which those two would have been, they're incompletions and drive killers. Earlier in the season against Illinois, we know that Luke Lindenmeyer was wide open in the end zone. Why are we throwing to Luke Lindenmeyer in the first place? I don't know. I don't care, but he was open and Dylan Raiola missed him. Again, that completion, that touchdown grab would have changed the game completely. So at the end of the day, everybody can talk about the screens, everybody can talk about the lack of handoff run game, but at the end of the day, the quarterback has throws to be made, and he is not currently making them. Now, am I calling Dylan Raiola a bad quarterback? Absolutely not. He's a good quarterback, but he's just young, and he has a ton of pressure on himself right now. And, he's just doing the best that he can. Um, and these throws are going to be made. They will. But right now, he's missed some really key ones that would have made drastic impacts on the game and probably in the win column for Nebraska. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's at times it's like he makes the hard look real easy, and then at times
Sure.
it's like, man, the
Yeah,
easy
exactly.
looks way harder than it needs to be. And that just, again,
Mm-hmm.
that'll come with time, that'll come with, just getting comfortable, and
100%.
having, again, part of that is just being comfortable in the offense and knowing, where guys are. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, because Nebraska doesn't have consistent answers, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard for you, the quarterback, understanding who's trying to do a lot, who's trying to be
Yes.
perfect. It makes him
And
uncomfortable, and so it makes the
yeah.
easy hard.
And look at his offensive line. There's two guys rotating at left tackle right now. Where you got a redshirt freshman with Gunnar Gatula rotating with a guard in Micah Mazuka, who's rotating at left tackle with Gunnar Gatula. So there's just some shuffling up front right now. So maybe I know Dylan trusts his guys and everything, but when that's happening in front of you, that's got to be in the back of your mind as well with some of those things. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just he's a good quarterback, but at the end of the day, he's a true freshman doing this college football thing for the first time, and he's missed some throws that would have greatly impacted games. But I don't want to continue to pile on Marcus Satterfield when game after game I'm seeing routes that are becoming open and Dylan Raiola is looking hesitant and either not throwing them or just barely missing them like he has. So there are plays out there to be made, and if they have been made, I don't think the Marcus Satterfield fire would be as hot as it is right now.
Right. And still, I think overall though, you want an offense that has a couple more answers given the amount of talent that is on the team. Again, you could obviously always use more, but there is true talent on this team. I thought they're
Mm-hmm.
getting good stuff from the line, like especially in pass blocking right now. I think they're getting enough from the line. I said it after the game in my grades piece, but I thought the O line did enough for Nebraska to win that game. I thought the O line on the ground and
Mm-hmm.
through the air did enough
Mm-hmm.
to keep Dylan Raiola upright. He had 3 sacks, but I think one or two of them are on him just holding the ball on for a second too long and trying to make something
Yeah.
happen.
One of
Um,
them was on the third play of the game when he was backed
mhm.
up on his goal line, and you could tell that he was. I think the start of the game, first of all, to Ohio State was just absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
You have Quentin Ives, a redshirt freshman running back who's a talented kid, but like super raw. And he's back there returning a kick. He muffs the punt, and now you're starting at your own 9 yard line. The game before that at Indiana, their opening field position was a 1 yard line because a true freshman, Ja'Cory Barney, caught the ball out of bounds. And then with Ohio State, I think it was on third and long. Dylan got sacked, and that whole first drive was not it. I mean, they were they looked a little overwhelmed by the moment.
Yeah. And credit to them. We talk about baby steps. Credit to them. Last week, it felt like that slow start just like lingered the entire game. They never got up
Yeah.
from the mat after struggling early. They
Mm-hmm.
responded, and I do give them
They
credit.
flipped that Ohio State. Yep.
Yeah, I do give them credit for that because that game, I felt it very early. The game felt very eerily similar because the same thing happened
Yeah.
defensively where they have those mistakes offensively, give the ball back to Indiana, get them to fourth down, but they convert that first fourth down and score. And then the second time you get them in that position, you get them off the field, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're like, oh, defense is getting some early wins, and then it just all went downhill, obviously from there.
Mhm.
But this week, defense responded, defense played well, they had answers, and they were on the benefiting end of Ohio State's offensive line play, which is like
Yes.
for Ohio State, it's like, come on, like Ryan Day and Justin Fry, man. Like you have to have your starting left tackle goes down. I know you're not banking on that ever being a thing. Like, I don't know if you have you heard the anecdote about I forget, it was the old I think it was the offensive coordinator when Peyton Manning was there. It was like if Peyton Manning goes down, it's just over. We don't practice when we're screwed. Like we're
Yeah.
screwed. Like if Manning
Yeah.
goes. So I understand teams don't practice for when their starting left tackle goes down, but for your Ohio State and you have that's your backup. Like, come on, man. Like, it just as a program, you should have to aspire the what you want and to get to where you want. And this is an Ohio State team that's dealt with offensive tackle injuries over the years. Like, this isn't new for them. They've dealt with offensive line injuries in the past. This is finally where the depth issues and the concerns from that fan base about offensive line recruiting are finally coming to a head. I'm beside the point, but I did think
Yeah.
Nebraska was on the benefiting end of that offensive line play, but I really liked the flashes we saw from Jamari Butler and Willis McGahee.
And I wanted to say, because you brought up the fourth and short stop, I mean the job that MJ Sherman did
Yeah,
to take on a double team from two tight ends, and then when one of the tight ends detaches to pick up a blitzing John Bullock, MJ Sherman just owned number 88. His name is escaping me right now.
G.
But
Scott Jr.
yes, G. Scott Jr. He owned MJ Sherman beat G. Scott and just stopped Henderson in his tracks for that fourth down stop. And I thought MJ Sherman might have played one of his best games as a Husker. I mean, he was and to listen to everything that was coming out after the game about what MJ Sherman was talking about at halftime and then after the game, just real motivating stuff. He's a guy that understands what winning looks like, spending 3 years at Georgia playing for Kirby Smart. He didn't get a ton of playing time over there on defense, but he's still kind of like saw behind the scenes of what this thing is supposed to look like, right? And then he comes out and he just is a real difference maker, I felt, at that Jack linebacker spot against Ohio State. And then just hear today from Tony White about the job that MJ Sherman does as a leader for the young guys like Prince Umamiel um, 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 and then Willis McGahee, the fourth, or is it? I don't know what it is, the
It's the
fourth or
fourth.
junior.
Yeah.
It's the fourth. Willis McGahee, he flashed with a strip sack, his second of the season right now. His first came against Colorado when he beat Jordan Seaton. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff to like. And Jamari Butler, like you said, he was looked the healthiest that he had looked all season, in my opinion. He was almost unblockable. I mean, that left tackle, I mean, we can say his names and Mikulski. I mean, yikes. He had one of the worst games, unfortunately for him. But yeah, there was just I wrote it in my check down column was Nebraska's defensive front exposed Ohio State's offensive line. And maybe that's something that everybody was kind of just wondering about with that team too. But yeah, I mean, I wrote as well, Ohio State is a national title contender, sure. But after Nebraska got done with them, they're going to have a lot more doubters for sure.
Yeah. I'll say this, and Matt Rule kind of avoided the question. I mean, we all got to see Indiana and Ohio State back to back. Indiana feels like the better team right now.
They
Ohio
do.
State has got the better players and the better top end talent.
Mm.
And I'd give that Ohio State defense, the edge over Indiana's defense. But offensively, it just feels like Indiana's is much more in rhythm, knows what they want to do. And even without Curtis Rourke, like they know what they want to do. They have answers.
Yeah, that's the
It
big
just,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, Rourke didn't even play, and Indiana's still kind of looking like a finely tuned,
right.
well-oiled machine on offense.
Right. So I'm curious to see more than anything that game and obviously what that will mean for the Big Ten standings and playoff implications down the line. But yeah, again, I just from what we've seen, it feels like Indiana just has seems to be a better overall team than Ohio State. But again, Ohio State, very talented program. I thought again Nebraska showed some things and showed they're not far off. As a team, I don't think they're as
Mhm.
far off as um many think. I think, Steve, for you, as you look at the schedule, and we talked about it a little bit last week, but you look at the backstretch of the schedule, knowing what we know about these Final Four opponents, kind of what's your thought process going into this? Like, and what do you want to see from Nebraska in these Final Four games?
Well, like we said last week on this podcast, I still think that these final four games are toss-ups. They're 50-50s. And so, with a motivating win, like, nobody thought that Nebraska was going to go to Ohio State and, be leading, 17-14 in the fourth quarter. Literally nobody thought that. Everybody thought it was going to be a bloodbath. Everybody thought it was going to be another 56-7 type loss, including me. But to their credit, they shut everybody up with how they played. They played so well at Ohio State, and that was a motivating type thing for this team. And so when you go into a game like UCLA, if you win that thing, you become bowl eligible. I think this team is motivating right now. Of course, it was a loss at Ohio State, and they don't want to lose football games. But considering the opponent, considering who was on the other sideline, considering just how hyped up Ohio State was to get out of there with just a 4-point loss, that's going to create some juice for this team, some energy. They're going to come out. I think they're going to come out against UCLA and really just be ready to go. But then USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, these are all winnable games for Nebraska. I'm feeling good about the final stretch. I mean, last year I didn't know what to think about the November stretch, but this year I'm feeling good about it. UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, two of those on the road with USC and Iowa. It's going to be a big game. That Wisconsin game is going to be big. It always is between these two head coaches and these two programs. But I'm feeling good about these Final Four. There's really not one on the schedule right now that I don't think Nebraska can beat right now. What about
For
you?
sure. Yeah, same. I again, like I think you look at this Final Four, Iowa's obviously the toughest opponent left. I'm very. I think the game that fascinates me the most, or the two that fascinate me most, are USC and Wisconsin. How Nebraska stacks up against
Yeah.
those two programs, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
interested to see because I feel like Nebraska and Wisconsin are on similar trajectories.
Yep.
Um, and while USC is like, where do they fit it in the Big Ten? And if Nebraska could come out with a win over USC, I think we have to have some conversations about Lincoln Riley and what's happening with that program. Um,
The heat around that program has just always like been there, I feel like, and
yeah,
with Lincoln and everything. I totally agree that Nebraska could start some stuff if they leave LA with a win over Lincoln Riley. I think that USC program is going to start needing to make some decisions.
yeah, and he's got a 90 million buyout, so it won't be happening anytime
Ooh,
soon. But yeah, I
I
know
didn't know it was
that's
that high.
tough. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. They're kind of stuck. They're it's gonna have to
They
be
are
like
stuck.
hey,
That's like the
go check out.
definition of stuck.
Yeah, go check and see if the NFL wants you or something. I don't know.
Bring Cliff
Um,
Kingsbury back. I'm just kidding.
oh goodness.
You know me. I'm a Cliff Kingsbury guy. So
He's having a good year. He's having a redeeming year a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess before we get out of here, just touching on what the guys for UCLA,
Hmm.
like we said, playing their best football, kind of coming out of the bye week. Ethan Garber's had, I think, the best day of his career. Threw for 380 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. It's the only game this season he hasn't thrown an interception. On the year, he's got more interceptions than touchdowns. But
Ooh.
having 4 touchdowns really helped against Rutgers, really helped close that ratio a little bit. I think it's 8 touchdowns to 9 interceptions now. I believe is the ratio. And I think Nebraska's going to have an opportunity because of the confidence he's going to have coming off that Rutgers game, because of the shuffled O-line, because of the chance that Rico Flores, who's missed some games for them, could be back. I think they're going to try and hit the air a little bit, and I think Nebraska's going to have an opportunity to come down with some turnovers. It's a quarterback that's turnover prone, and again, he's going to be wanting to throw it up, and who knows, if we see Tommy Hill out there or not, but even if he's not,
Yeah.
I trust the secondary at this point with the shuffling they've made, putting Malcolm Hartzog back at corner and Buford back at
Hmm.
safety.
At this point, I'm not really sure what to expect from Tommy Hill anymore. that injury just kind of seems like it's going to linger,
It's
and
a link. Yeah, and
he
you
didn't
and me
look
talked
right. He
about it.
didn't look
Yeah.
right at Indiana. He didn't look right at Indiana. He looked a step slow, and he looked sort of lost, to be honest with you, with some of the passing concepts that Indiana was throwing his way to kind of test him.
Yeah, and it sucks. It really hurts for him just because
Hmm.
this is his last year of true eligibility. He's got technically a redshirt year left, but I have no. He shouldn't come back for a redshirt
No.
year. He gains nothing from playing 4 more games, really. But a good year would have helped. And you and I said it when he
Hmm.
suffered the injury. That's a lingering type injury, and it could affect his whole season. And here we are.
Yeah.
Backstretch of the season. I have no clue if we're going to see him very much the rest of the way. So who knows?
Hmm.
I wonder what if Nebraska tries and figure out some type of solution for him. You hope at the very least he can be healthy enough for pro days and the combine if he gets invited. But this is a guy that had top 100 buzz, and just because he hasn't been able to play, he might just end up. I think he's just slipping down boards, and it's not really his fault.
No, it's a tough situation, and that's just kind of it's a poor situation to be in. It's nobody's fault. He got hurt, and the specific injury is what it is, and it's really hard to come back from that in season. But yeah, maybe Sierra Wright. He obviously has experience playing UCLA in the Pac-12 at USC. He's played against Ethan Garbers as well, so maybe that helps Nebraska's pass defense too. So we'll see. I'll also be kind of interested to see how Nebraska's run game kind of goes. If we see any more of those wham blocks, those traps from Justin Evans and the guards. But I'm really kind of interested to see how Nebraska's going to block somebody like Jay Toa at the
Yeah,
interior defensive line, 6'3", around 330 pounds. He's a massive dude. He's a former transfer from USC. Just a big guy. He's going to be playing in the NFL next year. He's not like a big sack guy, but he's just a space eater. He can take up two gaps by himself, allowing the guys behind him to do work. So I'm really kind of the line of scrimmage. I'm always interested in the line of scrimmage, but that's where I'm going to be kind of most interested in Saturday against UCLA.
yeah. Not a whole lot of names on this UCLA defense. Brian Addison in the secondary is one that I like. I think
That
he's an
rings a
Oregon. I
bell.
believe he's an
Hmm.
Oregon transfer. But I really liked him coming out of high school. Just good length, good athlete. And he's having a good year for them. Jay Toa up front. And I can't even put a name to, but like there's a couple linebackers. There's active linebackers. They rotate a good bit. They play a couple of different guys, but because of I think the space that Toa takes up front, you see those
Hmm.
linebackers behind him are able to get really active. And so
Yep.
yeah, like want to see more from Nebraska's run game. And honestly, I think offensively, maybe some downfield throws. I mean, they kind of hinted at it. Dale and Raiola kind of hinted at it. But they
Hmm.
want to be doing a little more of that, and I think they realize they can hit on some of those because guys are able to get open downfield. It's really just a matter of can they get off press, and if they can show to do that, they're able to separate.
And if they can get off press and it's there for the taking, is Dylan Raiola going to hit that deep ball? He
Yeah, I
hasn't.
mean,
He hasn't lately. He's been floating those things.
yeah,
So, and sometimes it's paid off with Nebraska with the DPI calls and everything, but throw those things to complete them and not just hope for defensive pass interference. In those situations, when UCLA is putting an extra hat in the box and loading the box and trying to stop that run, you're going to have single high safeties with 1-on-1s on the outsides. Can Dylan Raiola hit those? We know he can. We know he can. He's a very good quarterback. He's a great thrower. He's got a big arm. But stop floating those things and lead the receivers. That's what I want to see most from Dylan Raiola.
yep, same. Just want to see, yeah, again, like build some confidence. You did that.
Yeah.
You got a little confidence against Ohio State. Win a game, get bowl eligible, and build some confidence in offensively and some things you can do well defensively, and just this ability to maintain performances week to week and stay consistent. Yeah, this is a good opportunity to build some confidence, and yeah, as of right now, I expect Nebraska to come out win. We'll have true predictions on our bowl prediction show. But interested to see kind of which Nebraska team shows up on
Yep.
Saturday. Steve, before we get out of here, any final thoughts from you?
No, I mean it's a super windy day in Lincoln. I don't know if that was you wanting a weather report from me, but you just got one. It's super windy.
Yeah, and actually, again, looking ahead to Saturday, might be some rain in the forecast,
Is
which
it?
benefits.
Is
Yeah,
there?
there's a
Okay.
chance.
Hey,
Um,
well, oh yeah, yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
There's a
we will
chance,
see. It's bound
and
to change 19 times before we check it again.
oh yeah, it's November. You know how it is in
Mhm.
Nebraska. This thing changes constantly. But that'll do it for us here at Inside Nebraska. We'll be back next week with a recap from this game and some kind of big picture topic with the bye week the week after. But we'll be back next week. Always appreciate you guys for listening. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel for all of our YouTube content. Be sure to check out our work over at InsideNebraska.com. Steve has a check down up, a really much more thorough breakdown of what happened on Saturday. Some of Nebraska's wins, some things they can hang their hat on, some things to improve, and so on and so forth. We've got some recruiting updates. Nebraska, as big as this game is, it's also a massive recruiting weekend. They've got 50 plus visitors expected in town. We've got a running list over at InsideNebraska.com. Also on the recruiting list, we had a rundown of some headliners, so check all of that out. And yes, with that being said, we'll be back next week.